Okay, let's go. Chapter 5, Section 1, and we're looking at the concept called supply. Chapter 4 talked about demand, and that was the customer side of things. Chapter 5 is the person actually selling the product. And so it changes the equation in terms of how things work. You have to understand it's not just the purchaser, it's also the producer and the person who sells that determines the actual price. And so we're getting closer to how prices are set. That'll all come together in Chapter 6, but this is just the other side of the equation. And when we look at a company like Apple, if you're going to produce as many products as they're producing, one way that large corporations do production is they do outsourcing. They hire other companies to do the production from them. So Apple produces no Apple products. They have other companies do them. And so one of the biggest producers for Apple is a company called Foxconn. And Foxconn is one of those companies that can produce thousands, again, 100,000 iPhones a day. And this facility right here in this particular city houses thousands of workers that are building products for multiple companies. Okay, so when we talk about supply, there's your definition: quantity of a product produced at all possible prices. And we can see the supply schedule. And again, this is the idea. When we have a price, and there's a certain amount that are actually produced and created, okay? The price goes up, more is produced. The price goes up, more is produced. It's kind of like putting out bait. More money equals more that's available, encourages people to sell that product, okay? And so if we plot this on a graph, you can see this same information on this graph, the supply schedule. If we plot it on a graph showing the relationship, this is where we get the supply curve of those prices. And notice how supply goes to the sky, supply to the sky. Just like last week, down with demand, supply to the sky. And that's a good way to remember it when we're just looking at the curve. Okay, and so we have a law of human behavior. Now remember, we're not talking about one person, we're talking about society-wide rules. Okay, but in general, if prices for a product rise, then the quantity supplied of a good will rise, meaning producers will make more of something if the price is going up. If the prices are dropping, the quantity supplied of a product or a good or service will drop. Okay, and so it's what we call a direct relationship, kind of like the spoke on a bicycle, connected by a chain. If we turn the front sprocket this direction, the back sprocket goes the exact same direction. That's what we call a direct relationship. Okay, so supply is a direct relationship, whereas demand was indirect. If price went higher, then purchasing went down. So notice how the same signal, a higher price, tells purchasers to do one thing, but it tells producers to do the opposite. Okay, just as demand can change, supply can also change. And so if any of the factors listed here, costs of production, sellers in the market, inputs, costs of inputs, productivity increase, or what we think about is going to happen in the future, if any of those things changes, I mean, that's something other than price, then we have to redraw the curve. We have to shift the curve to the right or to the left. So again, if the curve shifts to the right, that would be called an increase in supply. If the curve shifts to the left, this would be a decrease in supply. Now, companies are in business to make money, not to make people happy, not to provide jobs and things like that. They're in business to make money. And that's the sole reason for why there's an adjustment in the amount of production. And again, a lot of this comes down to what production level produced the most amount of profit. Now, it's not just price, but it's one of the variables that they look at. Okay, so just as there's an elasticity of demand, there's an elasticity of supply. And you just got to understand, some products are more difficult to produce, and some products are easier to produce. But also, some products, it's easier to produce more of it, scale it up, scale it back quickly. So two examples that we have here, drilling oil. This is very inelastic. It costs a lot of money to find oil supply, energy to drill and to actually pump that out. And then, again, it's something that can very slowly, we can slowly increase the amount of production over time. When we think of daycare, it's pretty simple. It's not an easy job, but it's pretty simple. You can very easily, even if you have kids, just bring in another kid and somebody pays you for it. It's a very easy, simple business to expand. And as people are making more money at daycare, you'll see more people doing daycare. Okay, so just as we have to distinguish between terms with demand, we have to do the same thing with supply. So remember, quantity supplied is just a function of changing price. So remember, this graph only shows two variables: price, quantity supplied. So if we change the price, if we move the price up, okay, we're increasing the quantity supplied. Okay, that's what that arrow is showing. As we raise the price, companies produce more. As we lower the price, companies produce, that would be a decrease in quantity supplied. Now, like I said, if any other variable other than price changes, and there's many variables that can affect a company in terms of what they think is going to happen, and so they may reduce supply for other reasons. So what this graph right here is showing, here's your original supply curve. Sometimes we'll label it S1, and then the second supply curve, something else has changed. Reality has now changed. Supply curve has shifted to the right. So when the supply curve shifts to the right, that's an increase in supply. Now, if the curve shifts to the left, that would be a decrease in supply. Okay, so that's just how we tell that. Now, when companies are looking at whether to produce, they're going to be looking at issues of production costs, fixed costs, and negative returns. We'll look at that in our next section.